Good morning, FCCT. How's it going? Good, good, good. I hope you guys are all excited. I hope everybody's ready for our volleyball. Volleyball. It's funny because I laughed at my wife earlier for saying that, and then this is let that be a lesson to you. You laugh at your wife, you do it so to your own peril. So our dodgeball tournament, I wanted to let you guys know that all ages can participate in this. You don't have to be a great athlete. The balls that we use, they're a foam kind of thing. They still carry pretty good, but they don't hurt. You do miss out on that kind of satisfying, the playground ball sound of, how it hits. You do miss out on a little bit of that, but you won't get hurt. Well, I shouldn't say that. We have a history that would disprove that. But you won't regret. No, I can't say you won't regret it either. It'll probably be okay. That's what I'll say. It'll probably be okay. We're going to be in Exodus chapter 3 today, and we'll be in verse 1 through 3. And we're talking today about contentment, and we're talking about contentment in the midst of scarcity. And it's interesting as I think about the sermon before us, and I think we'll take some turns in it that are maybe a little bit unusual or unexpected. I think that this idea of contentment has just gotten harder as our culture and our society has changed. Would you guys agree with that? Would you guys agree that contentment's more difficult now? I think that, I remember as a kid, if I wanted to look and see kind of what was out there, if I wanted to kind of peruse, I remember like before Christmas time, if I wanted to know as a kid what toys were available, there were two choices. One was every year it seemed like we would get mailed to us the Montgomery Ward and the Sears catalog, and throughout the years those would be used as booster seats. You guys remember that? Families would come over with younger kids, and we didn't have a booster seat, but we had those catalogs, and so you didn't need a booster seat. So that's how they would be used. But before Christmas time, they would be used for perusing kind of what's available. It's either that or you actually physically go down to the store and you look with with your eyes. This is the old-fashioned way of being not content, right? The old-fashioned way of being not content took some effort. If you didn't have a catalog handy, you were going down to the store to be discontent. And now, the difference is that discontentment is right in your pocket, isn't it? It's right here. Because not only do you have at your fingertips everything that could possibly be purchased on the planet, but you also have a curated view into the lives of others, right? Because that's kind of what social media does, doesn't it? It curates our view into the lives of our friends and even people that we don't know. And it shows us only the good things, right? How many of you guys have ever seen online, you've seen on social media, somebody on a vacation that just looks amazing? Anyone seen that? And you think to yourself, oh man, I wish I was there. But what do you not see in that? You don't see the stomach virus that they picked up. Let your imagination wander. You don't see the result. You don't see all that. You don't see the mosquitoes. You don't see, I'm saying, like you don't see having your stuff stolen at the airport. You don't see, you see what I'm saying? Like we can be so discontent now because it really is at our fingertips. Now, it was possible to be discontent before, but I think it's just a bigger problem now. In Exodus chapter 3, verse 1 through 3, we're looking at Moses. And Moses has kind of got this example of this life of kind of downward mobility, right? He's a guy who's experienced the best that the world had to offer. You remember that he was raised in Pharaoh's house, and so he knows what really it is to be the richest, most powerful person in the world. Now, not saying that he particularly himself was that, but he lived in the household of that. He could see it with his own eyes. He was raised with it. And now he's in the middle of the wilderness tending sheep, and that's about as low as it gets. Like this is the range of experience of Moses, is that he's been as high as it can possibly be and as low as it can possibly be. And he comes in Exodus chapter 3, he's just herding the flock, and it says, now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. So this is good information for us, because it's not even as if Moses is keeping his own flock. See, this is the lowest you can get, is you're not keeping your own flock in the middle of the wasteland. You're keeping somebody else's flock in the middle of the wasteland. He's keeping the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. So Moses is here, and he sees something that he never ever seen. He sees something that is completely out of place. He sees that this bush is on fire, it's blazing, and yet it's not consumed. It's not shriveling up. It's not turning black. It's not turning to ash. It's somehow not doing all of those things. And when you see that happen, you don't go, oh, wow, so what? Let's move on with the sheep. Like, you're a shepherd in Midian. There's nothing else to look at. Right? You look at this because there's nothing else to look at, and because nobody's ever seen such a thing. It reminded me of Brother Che, who we have supported here at our church for a long time, missionary. He's a South Korean pastor, and they started a children's home. And I think about Brother Che a lot, and when he was, before he reached the age that he is now, he would visit us from time to time. And does anybody remember him preaching here, Brother Che? How would you describe that experience? Watching him preach? Joyful, right? He's this little, fireball, this little bundle of energy, this little, I remember him running back and forth off the stage and throwing things off the stage, and I think it was his notes. He threw his notes off the stage and then realized that what he had done and had to go back and get them, which I thought was very humorous. But he was just this bundle of energy, this fireball. And you think, well, gosh, man, how do you get that kind of energy? Well, I was looking online today, and the children's home that he helped to start, was responsible for starting, amongst a number of other things. Like he started a Christian university, started a whole bunch of churches. He was going up into China to train North Korean pastors who would slip across the border and then get taught by him and then go back into North Korea. Having escaped North Korea, they would go back to teach their countrymen about Jesus. And, had a radio program and has started all these things. But amongst all the other things that he did, in his spare time, he started this children's home, and they have to this day taken care of 600 orphans. How do you have the kind of energy that Brother Che had? Well, you take care of 600 kids, right? Doesn't that give you energy? Just think about it. Think about right now taking care of 600 kids. Don't you just feel the energy bubbling up inside of you? No, you don't, do you? You think, oh my goodness, how do you have energy for anything? Taking care of, now obviously he didn't take care of all of them at once, but he took care of a lot of them at once. And yet he had the energy to do all this kind of stuff. When I think of the bush that's blazing on fire and not consumed, I think of Brother Che. Because here's what I think is important to see in this text is that there's the imagery that's around God's presence. And when you look at the imagery, you find something very interesting, and it has a lot to do with contentment. And so what we're going to look at today is we're going to look at, number one, images of God's presence. Secondly, we're going to look at life-giving and life-receiving. And finally, we're going to look at we will see. And I think it's important to understand that, when you see people like Pastor Che, people that really make you look, that a lot of times what you're seeing is a picture of what's happening here in Exodus chapter 3. So let's look at images of God's presence. Let's look at the imagery of this burning bush. What should we take from this? The imagery of the burning bush is combining two different images. It's combining an image of something that represents people and something that represents the presence of God. In Hebrews chapter 6, just to get a flavor for this, Hebrews chapter 6, verse 7 and 8, it says, "For land that has drunk the rain that often falls on it and produces a crop useful to those for whose sake it is cultivated, receives a blessing from God. But if it bears thorns and thistles, it is worthless and near to being cursed, and its end is to be burned." Now, what is that talking about? Is the book of Hebrews just giving us some farming tips? You know, just in case you ever find yourself farming, here's a little bit of, advice. No, it's talking about people. It's talking about people, that God is basically like a farmer who has this land, and God is cultivating that land for a purpose, and their people are divided into two categories. They're divided into the fruitful ones, and they're divided into the thorns and thistle ones. And you don't want to be the thorns and thistle ones. You want to be the fruitful ones. In fact, Jesus even uses that. He says, "I am the gardener," or "My Father is the gardener, I'm the vine, and you got to remain in me." And he goes around and he prunes all the things off that aren't what? Fruitful, right? The idea is that you're being compared to you're being compared to this idea of being a fruitful plant. And all through Scripture, it uses this imagery. And so we have this picture of this plant, but then we also have this picture of the fire. And that's all over Scripture too, because God is described as a consuming fire. And why would God be a consuming fire? We want to think of God as like cuddly, But in the Old Testament, he's described as this consuming fire. Why? Because he does a lot of things that fire does. He purifies. He destroys, but he also glorifies. God's presence does all of those things, and God is like a consuming fire. God is something that warms. It brings life. It brings light. It brings energy. But that energy can be used in a couple of different ways. It can be used to cook your food, but it can also be used to burn something down, and God is like that. You see this carried over in the imagery of the temple. In the Old Testament, the temple was very specifically created, and we're told that it's created based on this cosmic pattern. That basically God gave the people of Israel the pattern, and that pattern was an image of the heavenly realms. And that's a pretty crazy thing to think about, right? I mean, think about that God, if you read the Old Testament, there are times when you get bogged down. You guys know what I'm talking about? You get bogged down, there's a lot of details. There's a lot of things going, like this is made this way, and there's this thing, and there's a base, and there's a pole in the base, and on the top of the base is a loop, and then there's 3 loops to the, you know what I'm saying? And you go to yourself, oh my goodness, why is it telling me all this? Well, it's not so important that you understand each and every little, you can dive into each and every little tidbit. And you don't need to do that because there are people who like that kind of thing. And they're called theologians, and they've done it for us. And they write about it so that we don't have to do that. Now, but if you want to, go ahead. I'm not saying don't, but I'm saying you don't have to. The point here is that what's going on is we're being told that this was very specific. There was a plan that was very specific. And the reason was that the priests doing their work in the presence of God, they were doing it in such a way that it reflected the reality of the heavens and God interacting with us. It was a symbolic thing that they were doing, and it symbolized spiritual truth. And on this piece of ground that the temple would sit on, you had the brazen altar. And in the brazen altar, when they dedicated the temple, God actually lit the fire himself, which is kind of a crazy thing to think about, isn't it? Can you imagine witnessing something like that? And then they would keep that fire and they would keep it going. And you know, the little altar that they had inside the temple, it used coals from this brazen altar. So all of it represented the presence of God. And when they would put something on this altar, 2 things would happen. Some of it would get burned and the smoke would go up. And the picture was that this is what God's presence is lifting this thing up. It's glorifying it. It's lifting this thing into the heavenlies. And the other thing that would happen is some of it would turn into ash. And the priests had very specific instructions. They had to take this stuff, this ash, and they had special containers that they would put it in, and they would go and take it outside the camp. It was the part that was rejected. And the view here is that God's presence does one of two things. It glorifies and it lifts up the things that are acceptable to it, and it rejects the things that aren't acceptable to it. And so the thing is that when Moses sees this bush that's on fire and not consumed, what he's seeing is a picture of a person who is being glorified by the presence of God, and nothing about it is being rejected. Nothing about it is being consumed. All of it is in line with God and who God is. Now that might seem like an easy task, to be that kind of a person. But I can assure you that it isn't. And I can assure you that when the presence of God comes into your life, it's very easy to have a lot of it consumed. But that when God comes into your life and it's not consumed but glorified, people will come to look. And this is what I want to tell you, that true contentment is a picture of God entering into your life and nothing being consumed. That you are okay, you are at peace with what God is doing in your life. That you trust God so completely that He can come into your life and do whatever He desires, and you will trust Him. When you see somebody like that, you come and look. You see, that's who Dr. Che was for me. He was that guy who, whatever came into his life, he was okay with it. Whatever God decided to drop in his lap, he was okay with it. He didn't start off going, hey, I want to create a children's home because I want 600 kids. That's not what happened. That's not why he started it. What happened was there were kids that were being abandoned. There were people who were not content with having their children in their life. And so he took them in. Why? Because God presented this opportunity to him. Now, for you and I, maybe we were doing the best we could to take care of the kids that we had. But when somebody like Dr. Che comes along, he's already experiencing a handful, like he's got his hands full. God says, here's one more thing. Where you and I might falter, where you and I might struggle, somebody like him says, God, I trust you. And when that happens, everybody comes to see it. Will the presence of God in your life consume you or glorify you? You see, this happens in good things and bad things. And it's really important to understand this. So the thing is, sometimes God will bring some suffering into your life, and when you're not consumed by it, people will come and look. And sometimes God will bring some blessing in your life, and you're not consumed by it, people will come and look. Because, we all want the blessings, but let's be real. The blessings take out just as many of us as the suffering does. I mean, aren't we? Let's be real. How many celebrities that you know that were taken out by blessing and not suffering? There's been a lot. There's been a lot. I was watching an interview. Something interesting is going on. I don't know if you guys are aware of this. There's a lot of people that are turning to Christianity. And I was watching an interview with Rob Snyder. And I'm not endorsing Rob Snyder. I'm not endorsing his life. I'm not saying that everything in his life is perfect. I'm not saying that he's the greatest believer since sliced bread. I don't know him. I'm only talking about what he said in this interview that I saw. Apparently, recently, his daughter, one of his daughters, went on a podcast or had an interview and had a lot of disparaging things to say about him publicly. And so he was being interviewed shortly after that by somebody, and they said, hey, the first thing I want to ask you about is this situation with your daughter. And he just started, and he says, yeah, he goes, it's probably good to talk about that. And he said, you know, if she's listening right now, this is what I want to tell her. I love you. I love you. And I wish I could have been the father that you needed back then. I'm really sorry that you're going through this. And I really wish that I had been a better father back then. And I want you to know that I'm sorry. And that I'm not mad about this. I'm not taking this as a personal attack. He said, I want you to know that I'm available now as the father that you need. And I'm not saying that makes up for it. He goes, I just want you to know that I love you. And of course, this made the person who was interviewing him kind of, isn't it hard to hear those things? He said, yeah, it is. It's really hard. He said, but when you love somebody, you have to take yourself out of the equation. He said, I have to understand that God has given me this opportunity to reach out. And that I might be able to help her to come to know God and who He is. Now, maybe that's all for show. I don't know. But I can tell you that when people hear somebody say something like that, when they know that somebody's been attacked publicly and that person, rather than deciding to attack the person back publicly, they say, you know what, you're right. I'm a sinner. I mess up a lot of things, and I messed up this for you, and I'm really sorry about that. And I'm reaching out to you, and anytime you want, I'll be here for you. When people hear that, they come to look. Because what's happened is that God has brought an occasion of suffering into somebody's life, and that rather than being consumed by that, because they trust God, there's glory that's coming from that. When that happens, people come to look. When God brings difficulty, trials into your life, can you find some joy in the midst of that? Can you trust God in the midst of that? Can you turn the other cheek? Can you repay evil with good? Can you love your enemies? Because if you can do that, and I'm not saying that it's easy to talk about it. It's a lot harder to do it. But if you can do that, people will turn aside to look. In the same way, can you find success and not be consumed by it? I was also watching an interview with Alice Cooper. You guys know Alice Cooper? Yeah. Lives in Arizona. Actually, a friend of mine sold Alice Cooper his Mustang, which was kind of cool. Except I didn't know any of them that well. I didn't know my friend that well, and I didn't know Alice Cooper at all. And it really has nothing to do with me, and I didn't see it happen or anything like that. But hey, me and Alice, we're like this, right? So Alice Cooper, I don't know if you guys know, but he actually grew up in the church and hit it big unexpectedly in the music business and started drinking and partying and doing drugs and did that really, really hard. And his wife said, I can't handle this anymore. And she left, and she was going to divorce him. And he realized that he had to get his life together. And he said, and he'll tell you, he tells people all the time, that God took his alcoholism away from him. That God freed him from it. That he decided that he needed to let go of this, and he let go of it, and he never looked back. He'll also tell you that all of his children are Christians, and all of them together are still in the entertainment business, and they're still surrounded by all those temptations, and there's still, there's money, there's power, there's all the temptations you could possibly face. And in the midst of it, his desire is that people come to know Christ. He does Bible studies for people. Here's the thing. The question is, Whether you're facing trials, suffering, or whether you're facing blessings and glory, everybody knows you. The question is, whatever God has brought into your life, the presence of God, God will decide what to bring into your life, what to allow to come into your life. God will decide this. Can you accept it? Can you trust Him enough? Can you handle that and not be consumed by it? Because if you can, people will come and look. We need to talk about life receiving and life giving, because this is a really important aspect of this. What does the image of the burning bush have to do with contentment exactly? And we've covered some of that, but the thing is that we have to understand, why does the presence of God act like a consuming fire? When God is with us, when God, everybody wants God with them. Have you guys noticed that? Everybody says, I want a deeper relationship with God. I want to know God better. But the problem is that when God shows up, a lot of times it doesn't go the way we planned. And the question is, well, why is that? Why is God a consuming fire? And to understand that, it's important to go back to the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve and their presence with God. Because what happened is that that's the reason why it doesn't work out very well. Because God will give you a circumstance or a restriction, or create an environment for you that you will struggle to accept. With Adam and Eve, it was, remember that there was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and when God said, don't eat of this, just that, it's funny because it could have been the tree of what's something, the tree of, we could say Taco Bell mixed with Denny's, sprinkled with some Cracker Barrel. Okay, there you go. That's what I was looking for. Whatever you don't like, right? Any kind of thing you don't like. It could be the tree of the things you don't like. And if God tells you no, all of a sudden you want it. Isn't that the way that it works? I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. The minute that God says, hey, here's the thing, I want you to stay away from this, well, all of a sudden we have a problem with God. That's why God is a consuming fire. God is going to be who He's going to be. And when we are trying to be something that's not compatible with that, then it's not us that's going to win. It's not the incompatibility that's going to win. We are made to be priests. And that means that we're go-betweens. This is the problem that we have with contentment. If you don't hear anything else in this sermon, I want you to kind of focus in on this. We are made to be priests, and a priest is somebody who stands between. He's a go-between. And what we are a go-between is we're a go-between between God and all the rest of creation. And so as that go-between, our job is to get life from God and to give life to creation. Now, I want you to think about that, because it's actually really important. And you might think, well, it's so simple. Okay, fair enough. But we mess up simple things all the time. We receive life from God and we give it to the world. The problem is we tend to want to reverse this. We tend to want to give life to God and take life from the world. What do I mean by that? I mean, we tend to go to the world for not just physical life, but for spiritual life. And then we want to give life to God. We want to create God. We want to define God. We want to make God in our image. Well, this is the problem. We have it reversed. We say, I'm going to create a God that agrees with me. It's crazy how that works, right? It's amazing. When I go to the Bible, I have a God. There's a God there I find in Scripture that looks exactly like me. How neat is that? The problem is that's the opposite of the way it's supposed to work. We're supposed to get life from God. God gives us perfection. He gives us the understanding of exactly the glorious state that things should be in. And then we go and we make creation look like that glorious state. The creation should look like a reflection of God. And we have a hand in making that happen. But it has to go one direction. And when we reverse it, we mess it all up. That reversal is a product of our discontentment. It's a product of our discontentment. So when I try to get life from the world, I end up trying to get something from the world that it cannot provide. How many of you guys ever thought that there was a thing in your life that you really wanted it, and when you had, you just knew that when you had it, things would be better in your life, that you knew. It could be when you were a kid. I remember there was a Huffy bike I wanted. Remember Huffies? Oh yeah, good quality. It was $80. I got $3 a week in allowance. My dad, being a kind, benevolent dad, he said, if you can save up half of it, I'll put in the other half. I think he might have thought I wouldn't do it. But I did. I saved up $40, and I got this Huffy. And I thought, I would lay at night, I would dream about this Huffy. I would dream about it. It wasn't very long. This might surprise you. If you know anything about bicycles and you know Huffy, it wasn't very long before my bike had a few problems. It wasn't very long before this thing that I loved so much would get left out in the yard in the middle of a snowstorm, or this thing that I thought was going to transform my life. It was just a bicycle. And all through my life, that pattern has been there. If I only get this, if I only get that, then it will be so great. And we take stock of ourselves, and it becomes a point of pride. I have this thing, I have that thing. I'm the strongest, I'm the fastest, I'm the richest, I'm the smartest, I'm the bestest, whatever it is, right? And that gives us life. The problem is that what we've done by trying to turn something in creation into something that gives us life is we've made an idol. That's what the definition is. We've made an idol. And because it doesn't work out, we want to blame God. We want to tell God that He has done us wrong. God, I'm not getting the life I want from these things. You've messed up. Why didn't you give me the thing that I wanted? Why didn't you give me the relationship that I wanted? Why didn't you give me the family that I wanted? Why didn't you make me as tall as I wanted or as handsome as I wanted? Why didn't you? And we go down the list, and we're reversing the way that the flow is supposed to work. Now, you might say that that's not really an accurate description, but it's interesting. The Bible talks about this in Ezekiel chapter 47. Starting in verse 1, it says, "Then he brought me back to the door of the temple, and behold, water was issuing from below the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. The water was flowing down from below the south end of the threshold of the temple, south of the altar." This is a vision of the spiritual temple that Ezekiel gets. And what happens is that this river flows, and as it flows down, it waters the land. It brings goodness to the land. And what's interesting is that if you understand the imagery of the temple represents Christ. But because we are in Christ Jesus and we're supposed to be in the image of Christ, it represents us as believers. And this is all over, once again, Scripture. In Isaiah chapter 58, verse 11, it says, "And the Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your desire in scorched places and make your bones strong." In the midst of scarcity, in the midst of difficulty, in the midst of suffering, God can make your bones strong. "And you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters do not fail." Do you guys remember that song? I've got a river of life flowing out of me, right? Makes the lame to walk and the blind to see. Opens prison doors, sets the captives free. I've got a river of life flowing out of me. Spring up a well. Wait. We've missed it. Who's supposed to be doing the gush, 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 or splish, splash, splish, splash? You guys failed me for the last time. No, it's definitely come to a middle, though. So here's the thing. You guys, that song was free. Don't feel like you need to put extra in. Sorry you had to endure that. But the point is, I'm trying to remind us that we sang about this. right? We sang about this, that I've got a river of life flowing out of me. So what's interesting is that you have this picture of fire in God's presence, and the result of that is water. It's water that flows. It's life that flows from you to other people. And you see that with Rob Snyder, and you see that with Alice Cooper. And you see that with Pastor Che. You see that in the midst of difficult circumstances that would tempt most of us or cause us to stumble or cause us to be consumed, that what happens is life comes out of these people to other people. Because you see, here's the thing. When you're not trying to get life from other people and you're getting it from God, you can give life to other people. You see, if Rob Snyder is trying to get life from his daughter, he's going to say, she doesn't have a right to say that about me. She doesn't know how hard it was to be me. I was only 26 years old, and I was struggling, and I didn't know any better, right? But when you're getting your life from God, you can give life to other people, and you can say, you know what, that's right. Man, I'm a sinner, and I wronged you, and I'm really sorry that I did that. And I will do whatever it takes, whatever I can, to make amends, to try to make things right. You can only be a river of life when you are receiving it from God and giving it to others. There's a reason why it's a river of life and not a lake of life. I want to say that again. There's a reason that it's a river of life and not a lake of life. Because when God gives you life, it's not just so that you can collect it. It's got to keep going. It needs to go down the chain. It needs to keep going out of you to the people around you. And if you can think about your life and think about the people that are connected and plugged into your life, are they getting life from you? Is the relationship that you have with them giving them life? If we ask them, would they say that? Would they say, I'm getting life from this? And if not, we need to look at our discontentment. We're not getting life from the true source of life, and we're not sending it on to those who need it, that God has given us. God's got to break us from our sinful desire to get life from other sources other than Him. And I was watching a video. There's a guy named Brock Gill, and I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him. He's an illusionist. He's got an interesting story. He's a guy that he was working just a regular job, I think he was filling feed bags or something like that. It was a hot, dusty, unpleasant job. He would spend the time, because he didn't like his job very much, he would spend the time praying. And the interesting thing is, as he was praying in this menial job, he started getting this idea that he could do something to reach other people for Christ. And so he became an illusionist, and he's done that, and he's hosted TV shows, he's done a bunch of different things, and now the reason that I came across him is because he rides motorcycles, and what's interesting about this guy is that no matter what he's done in his life, everything that he's done to try to bring people to Christ. And I watched a video of him. He was riding over this really high pass in Colorado, and he was with somebody else, and they were there kind of just to enjoy the day. And they came across a guy who was brand new to motorcycle riding and was on this deathly, narrow, winding, rocky road at 12,000 feet in elevation with 1,000-foot cliffs on the other side. And this guy was so afraid that he had left his motorcycle and was trying to walk back. And so Brock got to him and had a lot of experience doing this. And he said, hey, man, we will stay here with you. We will help you get down. Now, they could have gotten down the mountain in a matter of moments. They're really good riders. But this guy was stuck. And so they spent, I think they said, the next 6 hours helping him get down off the mountain. This guy fell dozens of times. And when he would fall, Brock would have to get off his motorcycle. He would go up to him, make sure he was okay, help him pick the bike back up, and then they would go a little bit farther. And then he would fall again, and he would just repeat this process for 6 hours. And he said, you know what? When I leave, every day my wife prays that I'll run into the person who needs me. She prays that I'll run into the person that needs me, and that was the guy today. He sees that no matter what he's doing, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he's being illusioned. It doesn't matter. If he was working at Walmart, it wouldn't matter. What he sees is that his job is to be that bush that's not consumed, to be content with what God has given him. Even if it's the suffering of trying to help somebody who has no business being where they are, and just encouraging that person and staying with them and doing the work to get them down the mountain. Well, I said that we'll end with, we will see and we will. Let's see. Contentment depends upon our trust in God, and our trust in God does not come easy. As a parent, I had a response to my boys that was used for a specific circumstance. When they asked something that was plausible, but wasn't something that I wanted to put the effort into, the answer was not yes, and the answer was not no. What was the answer? We'll see. How many of you guys use that as a parent? We'll see, right? Because it wasn't so bad that I could just immediately say, no, we're not doing that. And it wasn't so, easy to do that. I would just say, okay, let's do it. It was, we'll see. And there was a time in my parenting that I remember my son going to the other son, that means we won't do it. They caught on. The trust in my parenting was broken. What does it mean when Jesus gives us an answer? Does it mean it's just because God doesn't want to put the effort in? Does God say, we'll see, and in reality we won't? In 1 John chapter 3, verse 2, I hope this verse stays with you. It says, beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. You might struggle right now with being that bush that is not consumed by the presence of God. You might struggle right now with it. And what I want to tell you is stay in the fight. Keep struggling. Because that's what we will be. We will be that burning bush. Now, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to come right away. And it won't even come fully until we all see him as he is, when we see him face to face. But until then, we know that he is working in our lives to make us more and more like that all the time. We will have our full inheritance in the presence of Christ himself when we are fully ready. And until then, we wait with hope and with joy. We're having our lives disciplined, and we are content in the process. We talk a lot about believing, belonging, becoming. And this is what we want to focus on today, that we believe that life comes from God alone. We belong to him in a covenant of faith. We have put ourselves into his hands, and we trust him to bring us what we need. And we become a river of life to other people. Not a lake, but a river.
Thanks for joining our worship service today. Please follow us on our Facebook page where you can let us know about any needs or prayer requests you may have and keep up with the latest church news and events. You can also check out all of our past lessons and other videos by visiting our YouTube channel. At First Christian, we strive to be the presence of Christ in the world by helping others to believe in God's love for them, to belong to his church, and to become like Christ in their lives. If you would like to support us in our ministry, you may do so by giving online through our website at fcct.org or by mailing checks to the church. Have a great week.